Finally, at last, we're going to talk about Mummy the Resurrection. You could put a little asterisk on this one because Mummy the Resurrection was not really a full game series. The original Mummy book and the second edition Mummy book were both just generic World of Darkness supplements, mostly tied to Vampire the Masquerade, especially the very original version of Mummy. But designs that they're kind of compatible with any of the other White Wolf game lines in terms for the rule system. However, the mummies, there's only between 40 or 50 of them on the whole planet. They weren't really a big enough faction to justify getting their entire game series all to themselves. Now, in the aftermath of the Tempest that destroyed the Underworld and destroyed Stygia and the Shadow World and all that kind of stuff, at the end of the Wraith setting, all the old mummies were among those beings who were torn to shreds in the Duat, the Egyptian word for the Shadow Zone. The old spell of life created by Osiris was undone. However, Osiris himself, Lord of the Underworld, had managed to keep a hold of himself and survive the Tempest and create a new spell of life, and that is the basis for player characters in Mummy the Resurrection. These are no longer, original mummies from ancient Egypt. What they are modern-day people who have either just died or on the cusp of death, a tragic, too soon kind of death, not something that was supposed to be their natural fate, but, some sort of bad circumstance or unexpected event, brings a sudden inexplicable demise. Also, that there is something lacking in the individual is also a key factor. Some flaw in their personality that's kept them from truly achieving their best idealized version of themselves. Now, remnants of the original souls of the original mummies, as well as some other ancient Egyptian souls who had been serving Osiris in the afterlife in the Dark Kingdom of Sand, have been sent out to find these individuals who are at this point, at the cusp between life and death, and merge with them, bargain with them, find within them some balance between the two spirits so that they may become a new third entity made up of both. Unlike demons who are forcibly just taking over the shell of a person and, knocking their soul out and just using their body as a vessel to carry themselves around, the mummies are not overriding everything. In some way, the ancient spirit is still a little secondary to the modern spirit of the person because the modern spirit hasn't been fractured by the tempest that swept through the underworld. This means that the mummy essence is sort of taking a back seat, and whatever this composite being is, it's still going to primarily have their modern identity, their modern memories. After initially, making the agreement that they're going to do this and become one, they'll re-inhabit their body and bring it back to life with just enough energy to get their ass on an airplane and over to the Middle East, where they can find one of the various mystic sites of the Web of Faith, where hopefully members of the cult of Osiris or the cult of Isis will be there waiting to finish the ritual and turn them into a proper mummy. Arguably, the mummies in this particular version, but also the earlier versions, might be one of the only unambiguous good guys to be found out of all the various kinds of factions of supernatural creatures and humans that you can find in the World of Darkness setting. They're devoted to Osiris, they're single-mindedly against Set and corruption and Apophis. And all of this, of course, is for people who are familiar with the material, realizes that, Apophis is actually just the worm from Werewolf the Apocalypse. Set is likely to be Cain from Vampire the Masquerade, which means Osiris might actually be Abel. And since the mummies are the creations of Cain's slain, or shall I say Set's slain brother, in a very direct way, not even kind of like a metaphorical way, but like mummies are the anti-vampires of the setting. But in terms of what kind of, philosophical thing you could pull out of this whole design for how mummies operate, obviously, we ourselves, don't die and meet with ancient Egyptian souls and get forced back into our bodies or anything like that. But human beings can experience something known as ego death, whereas you find these moments where all of your assumptions and your entire worldview and everything you kind of felt things were building to comes crashing down around you, and you're kind of, forced through an extreme shakeup of your internal thought processes and your opinions. This can happen to people more than once. Some people can skate through their whole life without ever experiencing it. What I feel that the game kind of illustrates is that of the various options that a person has upon finding ego death, compared to the other kind of creatures that have their souls replaced or combined in different ways, such as changelings or demons. But with mummies, it's the turning back to ancient wisdom, finding the balance between modern sensibilities and the traditions of the old ways. Obviously there's religious overtones to that, not even, straight out in the book itself. I mean, after all, the mummy, upon first returning from the dead, has to make a pilgrimage to the so-called lands of faith to be able to, find one of these ancient sites that have been tied together in this, like a network of holy sites that Osiris has kind of pieced together across the shroud. Regardless of what, ever religion one might choose in the real world, a person who's undergone that kind of level of ego death might find solace and comfort and a purpose again by turning to, some sort of older traditional way of looking at things, as long as they don't let it override their modern sensibilities. They still have to be themselves and at the forefront of the driver's seat. But the thing is, and what's kind of often overlooked in the constant quest for progression and forward movement in our society, is that we all are basically navigating through a gray, formless void. And without landmarks, you really don't know what direction. You could be moving, but you have no idea if you're moving forward, backwards, or sideways. You can only tell what direction you're going if you're able to orient yourself to where you've been, i.e., you have to be able to remember and attach yourself to a past. Whether or not it's a good past or a bad past, you have to have a past so that you can tell that you're moving away from that past and not just looping and spiraling yourself right back to where you started. And so in that regards, attaching yourself to, the ancient wisdom of whatever kind of culture or society you find yourself in, certainly does have some benefits. But as I said, the whole point of Mummy the Resurrection is that it's a third soul. It's a combination of new and old. It's finding the balance so that you don't become too quagmired in stasis. Clinging too hard to the past means you're not moving at all, and that also means that you're not really navigating that dangerous gray haze we all find ourselves in.
Experience the thrills of classic pulp action adventure in Expedition to Ancient Egypt, featuring a variety of sourcebooks to enhance your campaign. Now available in the Ancient Egypt compilation. Get yours today on Amazon.com or DriveThruRPG and begin your time-traveling adventures in the ancient past.
Knowledge brings with it a desire for more knowledge. Desire for knowledge leads to questions. Questions lead to doubts. With doubt, it's hard to trust, and with no trust, you can't be faithful in something. This is the chain of events that led to the downfall of the angels and Demon the Fallen, the final game from the original line of the World of Darkness. There is also Orpheus, which was sort of a Wraith 2, where you're, humans, basically it's the concept from that movie Flatliners. You put yourself in a sensory deprivation chamber and hooked up to some wires and computer monitors, and suddenly you're astral projecting yourself into the lands of the dead to interact with what ghosts and other terrible entities there are to be found in the underworld after the great tempest destroyed everything. Demon the Fallen is strange, and not like in its concept. Role-playing games about, demon characters hiding within the bodies of mortals, having secret wars with other angelic factions and all that. Innomine famously was a good example of one of those kinds of games. The Prophecy, that movie with Christopher Walken and Viggo Mortensen as Satan, is another good example of that kind of genre, turned into film. On that level, no, Demon's not strange in that way. What's strange about it is how much it kind of stands in defiance of how the entire rest of the World of Darkness works. The demons' mindset and knowledge of their own internal history is very biblically framed, to a point where really the only other World of Darkness game it seems to be truly compatible with is Vampire the Masquerade, since a good chunk of the story of the fall and all that does tie in with Cain and Abel. It's not even that they're unaware of the other supernatural factions on modern day World of Darkness Earth after they escape from the Abyss and start re-inhabiting people. It's that they consider all the other supernatural beings to be completely beneath them. These aren't even these aren't demons in the way that Banes are. These are angels. They're just renegade angels, and the way the whole thing is set up, they're in a way now the last angels, because after they've escaped from the Abyss, they find to their shock that God is missing, and humanity has surrounded itself with machines and is seemingly both more powerful than ever before, yet also close to having reattained its weird sleeping unawareness that humanity had before the demons started interfering with them in the first place. And, it has a lot in common with a lot of demon fiction that's found throughout history. I find it interesting that their story of the origin of the fall actually begins without Lucifer. Lucifer shows up towards the end of the initial debate. But originally there was an argument amongst some angels over the fact that one of them, who had access to prophetic visions, saw some terrible calamity in the future that humanity was somehow tied with. And at that point they were just under orders to just keep an eye on humans and love them from a distance, but don't interfere with them. And so they started debating what to do, and Lucifer was the one that barged in and said, you know what, fuck it, we're going to do something. And it's all been downhill from there. Demon presents a version of events where, from their point of view, Lucifer and his renegades were operating for noble intentions. It wasn't the pride as depicted in Milton's Paradise Lost. It was a misguided desire to save this thing that they've made, but also with that came the creeping cracks of doubt. The angels themselves lost faith in God because they started to question the plan. And then as they, start interfering with humanity and causing what was essentially just a highly clever ape to start becoming fully self-aware of itself and its potential and capable of, learning abstract ideas and all the things that kind of tumble out of that in terms of our ability to, make reality-defying machinery and change the environment around us. Humanity itself started to question its place and question its role in nature and sunder itself from nature. And, wars between heaven and hell waged. It wasn't until Cain slew Abel, though, that the demons and angels actually learned to start at destroying each other and all that. But eventually things reached their peak. You have the flood, so that only the humans that were loyal to God survive, and the larger group of humans that had been loyal to the demons, who had taught them everything they knew, were all wiped from the world. And soon after a final conflict with the heavenly host, Lucifer and his forces were captured, and with the exception of Lucifer, hurled into the abyss. True hell, not some fiery inferno from some fairy tale storybook. True and total oblivion, where you're just a suspended consciousness, void of all sensory input, only kind of vaguely aware of each other's presence. And the demons were also aware of the fact that while trapped there and slowly going insane from that level of deprivation and isolation, they did notice that Lucifer was not amongst them. And so another divide of doubt began to spread amongst them as they started to wonder exactly why. Did Lucifer betray them? Was Lucifer destroyed? What happened? By the time, all those millennia later, when the demons were able to escape from the abyss at the dawn of the 21st century and started to rediscover what has become of the humans that they had so carefully shepherded in early times, they still don't know where the fuck Lucifer is, and they have kind of taken some rather variable stances on exactly how to deal with humanity. There's both a common thing in a lot of angelic demonic fiction is the idea that angels have kind of this weird subtle inferiority complex going on with humanity. They were created first. They were created with more power and more knowledge and more awareness of what's truly going on, and yet for some reason these pitiful little flesh creatures, are get exalted, higher in God's estimation, and have all these rules around them where the angels are only supposed to look but don't touch. And how, that just kind of base temptation, started to undermine the whole project. One could also argue that God wants all this to happen. Why would he create, as his perfect servants, beings that would question him at all? Sort of a thing. As much as the demons fret over the question of what exactly human free will have upon the final destiny of the universe, never kind of noticing that all of this trouble is being caused by their own free will that apparently they had been given. But their relationship with humanity in modern times is like they're not quite the demons that humans have been writing about, but yet at the same time they are monstrous, twisted, mad. Some of them still love humanity and want to see the best of us for us. Others want to use us as a tool to kill God itself and then rule over us. Others just, see us as the problem and want to see us punished just as much as they were punished. They need humans to sustain them because they need human faith and belief to keep their powers buoyant. Yet at the same time, much like how vampires view their flocks, we're just trifling nothings to so many of them, even down to the fact that they'll just so casually just take over a person. Much like mummies, demons and Demon the Fallen, will take someone who's right at the cusp of death or who has just barely died or is about to die, someone who's hollowed out their soul in some way or another through tragedy and trauma. Unlike the mummies who take this person because they want to rebuild them and remake their life and find some sort of new balance between the ancient Egyptian spirit and the new modern soul, the demons, they just push the original inhabitant out and they just take over the body. They have some access to the wetware memories that are embedded in the brain matter, but the original host's spirit is replaced, almost changeling-esque by the demon, which in and of itself, it's a bit of a selfish act. I mean, there are some amongst them who do realize that this is all their fault, but the people at the top, the leaders of the various legions and factions, just will go to great lengths to dance around about how it's everyone else's fault, it's God's fault, it's humanity's fault, it's the angels' fault, but it's not my fault, kind of thinking, which certainly if you rub a couple brain cells together for a moment, you can probably find a few analogies to things that are going on right now in the world that kind of trope applies to. Is Demon the Fallen a good game? If you want an all-demon version of Innomine, sure. I remember at the time when Innomine was out, I was like, how come White Wolf doesn't already have this? And then right there at the end, they squeezed it out. But it's strangely, just jarringly, just almost seems like it's set in a different world of darkness. Its backstory, because of all the heavily biblical influences, shall we say, over the nature of their origins, it's not compatible with Mage's ordering of the Tellurian. It's not compatible with the werewolf spirit world and their view of the triad. Where is God and all of that? There's even some language at times in it that also hints at their involvement somehow in the Exalted setting. I haven't looked at Exalted in so long, I can't really speak to that. Unfortunately, in terms of philosophy, though, I mean, reams of material have been written for centuries now regarding the philosophies of how demons are used and portrayed in stories and what they actually mean about human psychology. So I'm not really sure what all I could really say to add to all that. I find it interesting that, even though this is a fictionalized variant on biblical mythology, it shares quite a lot of details in common with it. And your Joseph Campbell universal trends of mythos kind of stuff, how frequently humanity does not want to accept credit for some of our most core basic innovations. It's always the gods or God or an angel or a devil who taught us how to do things. It's, we didn't learn farming on our own. We didn't learn how to make fire on our own. Like, all of this has been handed to us as gifts from some other entity. Or, even going further, peeling down even below that kind of stuff, you get to your more in-tune, natural kind of human societies that used to exist. Small little tribal groups, just living off the land in a semi-mobile fashion. Even they would have stories about how humanity was either given or stolen our various tricks by, the other animals that we used to share the world with. On some strange level, human beings just really don't want to acknowledge that we are part of the natural order. Even in modern times, even with all the modern atheistic, secularistic kind of culture we're developing now, even amongst science, we still constantly are trying to find ways to frame ourselves as somehow being above and beyond the natural way of things. That what humans do is unnatural, which, I don't know, are anthills unnatural? Are beehives unnatural? We are products of nature. Everything that we build and construct around us is pulled from nature. It's even the plastics and the quote-unquote artificial substances. Those are just us using alchemy to slightly modify one substance into another, but it's not like we created something fresh, ripped straight out of the ether. Possibly the strangest thing about us is our ability to take just like weird abstract ideas and turn them into physical things. Even there are marks of our type of intelligence found throughout the animal kingdom. There is something about us that is like, we did kind of like nudge it past a certain line, but that doesn't mean that we are no longer a part of nature, or that there wasn't a reason for it to have occurred. Our problem, perhaps, is that we have nothing to compare it with. I frequently have accused humanity over the decades of, when you look at all of our fiction and myth, I think we're clearly lonely. There is no other intelligent life that, stands, like on the same relatable rank as we do. I mean, we can say that, like pigs or dolphins or whatever isn't, or octopi or whatever, we can call them intelligent, but that's not really what we mean. Then it's part of the question of the Fermi paradoxes. Sure, there could be life everywhere, and there could be intelligent life everywhere, but intelligent life that smelts metals out of the ground and understands how to make batteries and transmit electricity along power lines to generate radio wave signals that you can then send pulses through that can create visual and or audio hallucinations, and those who receive those signals through a very specifically designed kind of interpretive device. How likely is that? It's only ever happened the one fucking time on this planet, as far as we can tell, and we've had like 3 billion years, albeit most of that spent as bacteria. Within any given volume of space-time, the most intelligent thing is, in a way, the mind of God for that given area of space-time. Perhaps the demons did a better job than they thought, and that's why when they escaped from hell, they found that God was gone, because mankind did like Nietzsche said, and we killed him and we replaced him, and that the human God is the sleeping, apathetic mass, the most powerful denizen of the world of darkness.
Enter a world of magic and the paranormal with Ghosts of the Shadow Zone. 2 complete tabletop games in one, featuring source material such as The Young and the Restless Dead, and secrets of the lesbian Illuminati, as seen in the classic horror tabletop collection. Available now at Amazon.com and DriveThruRPG.
We're going to talk, I guess, about Kindred of the East. It presents an entirely alternative type of vampire. A type of vampire that in some ways, while perhaps being a little bit more complicated in its overall character design, I kind of like them. They are not forcibly turned into creatures of darkness. This is very much their decision. There is no such thing as a Eastern vampire that was made into a vampire against its will. This is all their own choice, because in many ways, this is actually kind of like a strange variant on the Risen source book for Wraith the Oblivion, which was about, ghosts managing to, re-inhabit bodies and make zombies and stuff. These are a bit more powerful. These are people who've crawled out of hell, so on that angle, they're already bad folks, so already kind of destined to evil. How you want to interpret the fact that these are people who've defied the karmic wheel to come back to life and avoid their punishment and instead become something of demons themselves to mortals. Most of these vampires, they will feed on blood, but it's not exclusively blood, because what they're really feeding on is the underlying yin or yang energy. I guess some of the real, quote-unquote problems with White Wolf's World of Darkness and how it unfurled its year of the Lotus with all the Eastern variants of its games is that it really reinforces the idea that Far Eastern culture is otherized to a degree that no other, group on Earth is otherized from each other. The overall World of Darkness setting, certain kinds of shapeshifters or certain bloodlines of vampires and so on might be associated with a particular region of the planet or a particular, culture or civilizational arc. In some places, you're not naturally going to find a lot of werewolves in South America living there native to South America, because there's only one species of wolf. It's not even a pack type wolf that lives down there. You're not going to see a whole lot of werecats in Europe because there's no big cats left in Europe, not for thousands of years, all that kind of thing. Vampire clans like the Assamites are clearly out of, the ancient Iraq or Arabia. Even then, though, despite the fact that there was various things within the World of Darkness that were distinct to various ethnicities or regions or cultures, there was still a universality about it all, where they all still basically, it's just the Native American version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just an African version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just a Central Asian version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just a European version of something that's been going on somewhere else. And then you get to the Far East, which by Far East, let's be, more clear about the context, because we tend not to really, Far East is so vague. From what point on the globe are we even talking East? We're mostly talking about Mongolia, China, Korea, the Japan Islands, a few Himalayan countries like Nepal, Tibet, ostensibly part of China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and segments of the Indonesian and Malaysian islands. That's generally what we mean when we're talking about Far Easterners. Once upon a time, a lot of people would just say Chinese, but obviously not all those countries are part of China. And also, in a way, China isn't part of China because they don't call it that there. For some reason, in the World of Darkness, there's just a distinct radical shift in how everything works there. The spirit world is different. There's all these additional qualities that the various supernatural factions there have to deal with in regards to the balance between yin and yang forces, and the kind of the universalizing a lot of how they describe their various types of magic energy down to it all just being chi. Their spirit world is kind of somehow bubbled off from the rest of the spirit world and acts different, although when you really, I think part of the problem is that it's couched in the cultural idea that the East is other, and insofar that the World of Darkness is a fictionalized version of our world, is it the writers just kind of being bluntly dumb about how they're deciding to kind of treat East Asian culture as being something that's like wholly divorced and almost alien from how the rest of the world thinks and operates? Or is that a subtly brilliant depiction of how, like, our own culture has treated them anyway? Like, I think most of the quote-unquote problem with this whole East-West divide just really comes down to, like, the two language families are fairly fucking different. And so that creates this kind of illusion that, somehow, like, Chinese or Thai or whatever culture is so arcane in comparison to, like, our own and all that kind of stuff. But, I feel like if you were to, like, sandblast both cultures down to their core elements, you still are basically having the same values and the same beliefs. They're just naming things different. But the Kuei Jin aren't just... So, like, why weren't they done like the Ebony Kingdom? Why weren't they just other clans of kindred vampires? Instead, they're this entirely unique other kind of vampire that only seems to arise from population areas that have a lot of humans of those particular nationalities that I mentioned just a minute ago. That is a little weird, perhaps possibly in the context of the greater game, where like anyone on Earth could decide to be bonded with a fucking mummy spirit, even though they're all from ancient Egypt, but they don't just exclusively bond themselves to Egyptians. And while various vampire clans might have their origins in one particular country or nationality, as they've spread across the world, there's nothing stopping them from embracing and turning anybody of any origin into a vampire of their type. Same thing with the African legacies, which are just what they call the clans. They function the same, so they're still basically it's a traceable bloodline from an ancient vampire that's had a stamp on how their descendants operate in terms of what kind of weird flaws they might have and what kind of disciplines they specialize. It's a common, axis upon which a faction can be built. So it really doesn't matter what it's called. Werewolves arguably are maybe a bit more tied to their tribe's ethnic regional origins, but that's also been blurred. Kinfolk can mate with anybody, just like humans can, mate with anyone they want, and therefore, like, that bloodline can suddenly, you might be descended from Russian silver fangs, but, if a couple generations decide to, like, breed into people of a Caribbean origin, suddenly you have a Jamaican silver fang after a few generations. Yet, for some reason, only East Asians get to be Kuei Jin. And so, yeah, that's a little weird. And as I say, is that supposed to be kind of a statement of the world of darkness being a statement on our world, or is that just kind of like just... there's people just doing the standard thing. I've got to write a book about, China and Japanese vampires. Oh my God. Well, I guess just throwing all the classic things that people are going to be expecting in it, like, like the fruity paint job and the pagoda kind of styling, the American Chinese menu font they use for stuff. I wish they could have just presented an alternate vampire that's maybe a bit more universalized. They maybe regretted it because by the time you get to San Francisco by Night, it does start talking about things that apparently here and there a few non-East Asians have started to also come back as Kuei Jin, but coincidentally only in areas where there's a bunch of Asians in Kuei Jin. Maybe it's something tied with, it's a paradigm issue, kind of like with Mage, and it's just people who are Buddhist or Confucianist, Taoist, or Zen, Shinto, just for some reason, when they die and go to hell through that particular paradigm of belief, they get this option to crawl back out because of how the Yama Kings operate in the Thousand Hells. I don't know. The Hengeokai for Werewolf the Apocalypse, I feel are a lot better. In many ways, the Hengeokai, their spirit world is they relabel things a bit differently, but it's pretty much the, identical. It's just different language, different names, duh. The significant thing is that their Hengeokai is the collective whole of all the different kinds of shapeshifters. For some reason here in the Far East, the War of Rage didn't occur, and the various types of shapeshifters still get along with each other. And, it actually does the thing that, the vampire game didn't, where, like, it's not like you have just a totally new set of shapeshifters. Many of them, like the Khan or the Shadow Lord Haken, have already... They're already part of the setting. It's just another part of the world. They just dressed up a little differently. Like I said, arguably you can kind of say maybe Kindred of the East should have been more of, or it wouldn't quite have seemed so much like it leans into the idea of Asian as alien, which is also, okay. I guess, like I said, the Hengaokai, I feel like they kind of show an alternative of what the werewolf setting would have been if the werewolves hadn't murdered all the other shapeshifters in ancient times. Not a whole lot else to say about it though, compared to the difference, because they're still the same changing breeds. They still operate the same. So most of what I've said about Werewolf the Apocalypse still basically applies to Hengaokai, except that they believe that there's more beyond the age of the apocalypse, that the age of the sixth age is not actually the end, it's just the worst part, but then things will start to get better afterwards. The Kuei Jin, viewed in the context of the standard stereotypical beliefs held about East Asian civilization. And I'm going to say overall that perhaps this game I wouldn't say is racist as so far as it is civilizationist. Whereas, Western vampires are kind of like a statement about politicians and, people with a lot of political power and wealth. This is like a statement about hard identity, like hardcore individuality in the face of mass conformity. In the context of being part of this culture where everything's supposed to be perfectly ordered out and everyone's supposed to, adhere to their duties as handed down by tradition and what their social rank is supposed to imply. The Kuei Jin are like, fuck that. They're defying their appointed fate. They did bad, they went to hell, and they're like, fuck you, I'm going back. And they actually pull it off. They didn't, need some holy man to come down and bargain to take 40 of them out of there or anything. They've done this entirely under their own power. And so, I guess you can pull some sort of thinking out of Kindred of the East about, the nature of the individual and the importance of self-determination. And whether or not is that saying that defying your place and forcing your own self-determination in the face of the inevitable conclusion of your actions causes damage and makes you into a monster, perhaps. Makes you into something that has to feed on someone. I don't know. Kindred of the East is kind of a tangled mess. Return to the 3rd century BC and the very dawn of civilization in Pax Luporum, Werewolves of the Republic, complete with campaign setting sourcebooks for the island of Sicily and the island of Lesbos. Now available as a collected starter kit edition. Available now on Amazon.com and DriveThruRPG.